online, YouTubers and Facebookers. We're glad you're here. This morning is my fourth message on the book of Ruth. I've titled this, You Have Comforted Me. I don't know how many of you have been through a traumatic or tragic event. Ruth and Naomi have been through the death of a spouse, and Naomi lost two sons. So they've been through some trauma, and they're heading back. I know we've been through this hurricane. It's not quite the same thing, but it kind of gives us a taste of, what some traumatic experience. Some of us lost things, lost power. Our friends at Private Church lost their building, so I think they're trying to rebuild it, but it's out of service. And one of the things the Lord, He does not promise to keep us from difficulty, but He does commit to be with us and deliver us from them all. So I found this Psalm of David, and Ruth is the great-grandmother of David. So it's kind of as I've been studying these, you can kind of see how some of the characteristics of one person are kind of passed on to the next generation and the next, and you can kind of see how these things build on each other. So this is Psalm 34, starting on verse 19. The afflictions of the righteous are many, but He rescues him from them all. We don't know everything that was in the thoughts of Ruth and Naomi as they came to Bethlehem, but their future was unsure and their survival was an issue. Naomi decided to return to where she thought the Lord would provide for them. And many times we have to take that step or make that turn to realize the provision of God. All He has for us is there. We just have to reach out to receive it. Often it requires effort on our part to activate or realize this provision. Like other relationships, there's a need to be giving and receiving, listening and talking. The Lord is present and active. You just have to reach out and see. We've made it to chapter 2 in Ruth, and here we see a part of Ruth's interaction with Boaz, their family's kinsman redeemer. This is chapter 2, starting in 13. And then she said, I have found favor in your sight, my Lord, for you have comforted me, and indeed you have spoken kindly to your servant. Ruth has gone to Boaz's field to collect what was left behind the harvesters all day, and the workers have noticed her. And what was going on, I don't know if you're familiar with the plans back then, but it was a way of caring for the poor among them. The harvesters would leave the corners unharvested, and some would fall behind as they harvested along there, and they would allow the poor and the needy to come behind them and collect food for themselves. And so Ruth has decided to take this on, and she's following behind the harvesters and collecting, and the workers have taken notice of her. And some sources I've studied have suggested that Ruth was the daughter of a very important person back home in Moab. But she's chosen to come with Naomi and humble herself in this way to honor Naomi and to seek the God of Naomi. This act requires a certain trust in God to protect and provide. Because as we've learned, sometimes these situations are not so safe for a young woman to be out there with all the harvesters and the men, and things could go bad. But she trusted that God was there to protect and provide for them. And she did what was the next thing to do. She goes out to glean behind them. And so this act, it requires the trust. And I found another psalm that really kind of speaks of that. Psalm 27. And it starts, The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? The Lord is the defense of my life. Whom should I dread? When evildoers come upon me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and my enemies, they stumbled and fell. If an army encamps against me, my heart will not fear. If war arises against me, in spite of this, I am confident. One thing I have asked from the Lord, that I shall seek, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord, and to meditate in his temple. For on the day of trouble he will conceal me in his tabernacle. He will hide me in the secret place of his tent. He will lift me up on a rock. And now my head will be lifted up above my enemies around me, and I will offer sacrifices in his tent with shouts of joy. I will sing, yes, I will sing praises to the Lord. Hear, Lord, when I cry with my voice, and be gracious to me and answer me. When you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, I shall seek your face, Lord. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger. You have been my help. Do not abandon me, nor forsake me, God of my salvation. For my father and my mother have forsaken me, but the Lord will take me up. Teach me your way, Lord, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Do not turn me over to the desires of my enemies, for false witnesses have risen against me, and the violent witness. I certainly believe that I would see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and let your heart take courage. Yes, wait for the Lord. So in the beginning of this, it says, the Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom should I fear? And say he provides those things. He is those things. Imagine how much less we would worry if we took this verse to heart and lived in it. The Lord is my light, and the Lord is my salvation. There is no salvation apart from him, but he is salvation. The Lord is my light. The light has overcome the darkness, and in the light there is no darkness. I can see in Ruth this calm faith. I mean, she does what she has to do, but she doesn't seem to be concerned about the big picture. She just does what's needed. They get there. Apparently they have a house, and maybe they have a field, but no crops have been planted, and it's harvest time. She gets there. They put their stuff away, and it's like, okay, we're going to need some food. And they go get some food. She just does whatever's next. She comes up. The powers of darkness cannot be feared. The Lord, our light, consumes them. We have to have confidence in the plan and the provision of the Lord and carry on. In 1 John, it tells this, 1 John 1:5. This is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. Just to say it is him, we need him. We want him, not just what he provides, but we need him. So to kind of review and recap the story of Ruth and what's happened so far. Ruth and Naomi together in Bethlehem, two widows who've lost their husbands, and Naomi's lost her two sons. It all began as Elimelech decided to leave the provision of the Lord, and there was a famine in the land, so he decided what to do is this. And he went to Moab, which was kind of a worldly city. I don't know if it's quite like our Las Vegas, but it was kind of a worldly city at the time. And I think we often choose to follow the path of Elimelech when we decide to do things our own way. Instead of trusting the Lord to provide, we decide, I've got to do this. I can't wait. My research indicates that Elimelech was a leader among his people. Someone that they would have responsibility to kind of care for them and kind of oversee them. Therefore, when he left to seek his fortune away from them, he also left them somewhat without a covering. Now, I've thought about what does that mean to be in a position where others are sort of under your care. From what we have in the story, the people in Bethlehem were okay after he left. They survived. So I'm not sure exactly how it applies, but I think I can relate to it somewhat. Back in the church where we were for many years, I was always busy doing things, many things. I was an usher, a greeter, worked the soundboard, small group leader, was on the prayer team, neighborhood outreach to children, children's Sunday schools. I cooked for some events. And in my thoughts, I got to this place of thinking, why does all this matter? These people already know the Lord. Am I doing anything useful with this? I'm spending all my time. I'm doing things, but does it really make any difference? And eventually I came to understand that it matters because this is what the Lord wanted me to do, and He wanted me to do it with Him. He wanted to be with me. And I thought, sometimes we do, we have projects around the house, and we do it with our kids, and it's not necessarily more efficient to do it that way, but spending the time together is good, and we teach them the things that we know. We pass on what we've learned, and the togetherness is part of what's important in these things. And sometimes I think we take the short view that everything we gain and do here is temporary, but the Lord and everything in the kingdom of heaven is permanent. So nothing that happens here is necessarily permanent. We have to take a kingdom view, but still remain useful in this life. Elimelech, when he broke his connection to God's people, and his family seemed over with, he died, his sons died, no offspring coming up. But the Lord has a plan for them, and He had a plan for them. Naomi and her daughter-in-law she chooses to seek the God of Naomi and to serve and protect Naomi. Once they get back to Bethlehem, they cause a stir, and Naomi is feeling sorry for herself, as we can see in this passage, in chapter 1, verses 19 to 21. So they both went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they had come to Bethlehem, all the city was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" But she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me." And Mara means bitterness. "I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me?" And as I was thinking about this passage in the emotional, mental space, as we might say, I wonder how often we go there, so to speak. We tried something, it didn't work, the Lord's working against me, and we come back to the Lord sad and wounded after the fruits of our going our own way have come to bear. I think the Lord has done this to me, and actually to us. We have our own way of disobeying the Lord, and we seek our own plans, and it goes badly. The two of them, Ruth and Naomi, arrive in Bethlehem just as the barley harvest has begun. I mentioned this in chapter 1, verse 22. So Naomi returned, and with her Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, who returned from the land of Moab. And they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So I don't know that much about barley, so I was looking it up on Google to see what they have to say about it. And it's a nutty flavored and pasta-like grain, very versatile, can make an interesting alternative rice, and even put it in risotto. Try it for breakfast as a hot cereal with fruit, or in a savory sweet porridge with ham and eggs. Barley can be a wonderfully hearty addition to soups and salads. Sometimes I put it in beef soup just to kind of bulk it up, and it's a pretty good addition to that. Also, some people have been known to make beer with it, so it has that quality. And I was trying to understand the amounts and stuff that they're talking about in there, and I once again went to Google, but they've added a new AI to their search, which I was disappointed in. So let me read you what the new AI produced. So an ephah of barley is a Hebrew unit of dry measure, roughly equivalent to a bushel, or 35 liters. So that's a lot. It weighs around 29 to 30 pounds. This amount of barley could last for several weeks, or even up to 10 days. This is AI with the measurements. Yeah. And some say it was worth at least half a month's wages. So that whole thing didn't make sense. 10 days, so you get half a month's wages and you only get 10 days worth of food. That doesn't seem to work out so well. So they need to work on their AI, I think. Yeah, maybe they make some more beer than it does food. But anyway, that's kind of my rant about AI. I think if we depend too much on that, it's not going to go well. And we may all be a little dumber because of it. So, but I mean, in some ways, Google is helpful. I was thinking all the research I've done on this, I would have had a big stack of books to sift through and trips to the library and everything else. So it's nice to be able to look stuff up, but you got to be careful what you get and find some other sources to verify. Okay, so we're moving on to chapter 2, starting on the first verse. Now Naomi had a relative of her husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech, whose name was Boaz. And Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, "Please let me go to the fields and glean among the ears of grain, following one in whose eyes I may find favor." And she said to her, "Go, my daughter." We can see here that Ruth is practical and positive. She's also lost her husband and could easily join Naomi in bitterness, but she chooses to stay positive and start taking care of business. And one thing I've noticed in my character studies through the Old Testament is that the Lord often comes to these characters while they're working. When I was studying Gideon from the book of Judges, which is the previous book, and I've also noticed that these stories can stand alone, but also they kind of build on each other. What we learn gets added to in the next one. So Gideon found himself, and Israel, found themselves in trouble for being disobedient to the Lord and seeking other gods. And the enemies of Israel are wreaking havoc on them and their crops and livestock. And our man Gideon is complaining to the Lord about the situation while he's hiding in a wine press and threshing out wheat to make food for his family. And I love the way the Lord comes to speak to him. It's in Judges 6. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "The Lord is with you, valiant warrior." And Gideon said to him, "Oh, my Lord, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? And where are all his miracles in which our fathers told us about, saying, 'Did the Lord not bring us up from Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to Midian." So here we have Gideon. He's hiding in a wine press, trying to make some bread for his family, and complaining about his situation. And the angel of the Lord comes to him and calls him a valiant warrior. And I know lots of times I need that kind of encouragement because I don't often feel like a valiant warrior, and sometimes I complain about my situation or what I've gotten myself into. And really what all we need is right at hand. It's available to us. We just have to look the right way for it. Sometimes the Lord will give me a passage or phrase, and it stays with me for months or even sometimes years. And I see all the scriptures that I read through the lens of that concept. And this is currently what's living in my head. It comes from Matthew 4:12 through 17. Mostly it's the end, but I need a little bit of background to get up to it. Now, when Jesus heard that John had been taken into custody, he withdrew into Galilee. And leaving Nazareth, he came and settled in Capernaum, which is by the sea, in the region of Zebulun and Naphtali. This happened so that it was spoken through Isaiah the prophet would be fulfilled. The land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, by the way of the sea on the other side of the Jordan, Galilee of the Gentiles, the people who were sitting in darkness saw a great light. And those who were sitting in the land in shadow of death, upon them a light has dawned. And from that time Jesus began to preach and say, Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. What does that mean? My understanding means it's right here. It's right now. We have access. It's present. It's not just a future thing. It's here. Even in the Lord's Prayer, we say, Your kingdom come on earth as in heaven. Now then, how should we live? Like Ruth and Naomi, turn towards the Lord and get busy with the kingdom. For me, it's sometimes easy to overlook the human side of Jesus. I mean, after all, we kind of know how the story ends. But Jesus, I think, experienced the emotions of being human, and his cousin has been captured at this point and then murdered, not because he was in some sort of battle, but because of the wishes of Herodias, Herod's wife. I know I'll almost always complicate things beyond usefulness, but the core of Jesus' message is contained in this concept. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. He went on healing and teaching and feeding people with this message. The kingdom of heaven is at hand. Chico is currently working through the book of Acts, where we see how the disciples live and work this out, while navigating religious and political opposition, as well as personal conflicts among themselves. The book of Acts is a good example of living the reality of the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The early church, full of the Holy Spirit, was able to spread the good news of the kingdom throughout the entire world. I believe that the Lord has many blessings for us. He wants us to know and trust Him for them. Often I think I miss blessings prepared for me by refusing to reach out and take them. And I've heard a saying that says, many opportunities are missed because they look like work. Many of us tend to wait for the Lord to do something for us when He wants to do something with us. Our character Ruth quickly assesses the situation and gets busy, which allows the Lord to work His plan through her. I think I should make the statement that we don't work to gain acceptance from the Lord. We work with Him because we are His. Sometimes when we think we have to earn our position with the Lord, we become angry when others don't seem to work as hard as us. We start to judge their commitment to the kingdom. It's never our job to judge others. Judgment only leads to bitterness, which is not one of the fruits of the Spirit. We see examples of people that are constantly working to prove themselves worthy, and it seems to me to come from a place of doubt. In my experience, those that are always trying to impress or prove themselves are not as productive as those who accept that they are a part of the team and work together to accomplish the objectives of the boss. I'm not sure if I'm painting the picture well enough to make the point, but if there's a member of the team that's always doing things in a look-at-me way, there's often an element of, look how much better I am than those people. And that's the pride that causes problems for us. We are all the same in the eyes of the Lord. Pride can also lead us, this is something I found on Wikipedia. Pride can also lead to negative consequences, such as self-contempt, self-pity, impaired cognitive performance. For example, some studies have found that pride can impair children's ability to delay gratification. Pride can also be rooted in low self-esteem and self-worth, as people may mask their flaws and insecurities with feelings of pride. Hubristic pride, which is associated with arrogance and superiority, can lead to negative outcomes. This subject seems to bring us a grace versus work type of situation. I don't know if that's part of our gotcha culture or if it's just a genuine misunderstanding of grace. But we are saved by grace through faith. But This is not an example of working in the kingdom. It merely states grace is the source of our salvation, and grace is the base from which we work. It's amazing how looking into the scriptures can help us define what to say. I found this in Luke 14. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. This verse best describes Ruth in our story. I imagine she could have sent back to Moab and have her family send some supplies to them. But instead, she chose to humble herself and do what was the next thing to do, and let the Lord work through her. I think even as young toddlers, we're always trying to do things our own way. And I wonder if that's what it is that makes us so resistant to listening and doing what we're instructed to do. We have some apprentices at work, and they love to talk, but listening, not so much. I wonder if they think that all the old ways are the wrong ways, and only they knew the right way, because us old folks don't know how to do it. Or we're not as good as the app on our phone, which has almost nothing to do with electrical work. But And I think about that. I imagine I was probably similar at that point in my life, all heady and full of myself. And oftentimes when I'm working on this message and trying to figure out what I'm going to say, I have to ask myself the question, so what? Why is this information important? What does it mean for me, or what does it mean for us? How can we put this lesson and example to work in our lives and for the kingdom? The lessons of Elimelech might be a little easier to apply when the Lord gives us a position and responsibility. He's inviting us to learn and to do things with Him, not challenging us to do it our own way. When I look at the actions of Ruth, I see both a willingness to do what is needed and a trust that things will work out. She had a quiet confidence. I try to put yourself in the situation. There they are, two widows. They have a house, but not much else. If there's land, there are no crops planted. And it's harvest time. It can be easy in times of uncertainty to give up or be immobilized by so many things that need to be done. In our story, Ruth seems to see the next thing that needs to be done and goes to it. Often we can be bogged down by the whole job and not accomplish what needs to be done. Recently, we moved to a home just over half the size of the old one. And there was space in the old ones that we didn't need or use. So it's a reasonable path. But a task like that has many things to be done and some difficult choices to make. What to keep, what to let go of, what's really needed and what's important just because it makes our home our home. I imagine Ruth and Naomi had to make many of these choices as they were headed back to Bethlehem. Sometimes for us to do what the next thing is, we have to have faith that there's something more. There is a future. It's kind of a famous verse from Jeremiah, but I think it's always reassuring to me. In chapter 29, starting at verse 11, "For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans for prosperity and not for disaster. I give you a future and a hope. Then you will call upon me and come and pray to me, and I will listen to you. And you will seek me and find me when you search for me with all your heart." Sometimes it feels like too much in this life, and things are not moving the direction we thought they would. Society and government seems to have lost its collective mind. I think what the Lord is saying is to trust Him to deliver us from all of our trials. There are those that are concerned about so much. Is the planet overheating and causing storms and disasters because we use gasoline cars? Is there enough food to feed everyone? Is our government corrupt? Is it responsible to bring children into this world, or are people the problem for this planet? Can I survive this economy? And as I was thinking about this, there's a guy that I hear on various places, Jordan Peterson, and he's a psychologist and speaker, and some of his advice in one of his books is, get up, make your bed, and clean your room. And I've heard people get into, we have all these things to worry about, and how can you give advice to people, clean your room? How can that be the thing to say? And he responds back to him, he says, if your own house is not in order, who are you to try and rule and fix the world, the planet, your government? Get your things in order. I think, that is good advice. It's a solid thing. You got to do the next thing and move forward. Take the next step. Instead of trying to jump up on top of the whole mountain, you got to take that first step and keep taking steps till you get there. It's kind of no surprise that sometimes we get stuck into the vortex of all these concerns and the problems of this world, but God is still God. He created all that is, and by the power of His Word, He can handle it. And from a little earlier in this chapter in Jeremiah, we can read kind of his advice to, and he's speaking to the exiled Jews in other lands. And he says, take wives and father sons and daughters. Take wives for your son and give your daughters to husbands, so that they may give birth to sons and daughters and grow in numbers there, and do not decrease. Seek the prosperity of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord in its behalf, for in its prosperity will be your prosperity. And I think, in this message, the Lord's telling us, just do the next thing. Trust me. Seek me. It may not be easy, but nothing of value is. He will be with us, and it'll work out. Sometimes we have to take the view of what's next, other than, oh my God, everything's a mess. They need those around us are experiencing difficulties, and some of us, that we know well, had bad news or damage from the storm, and they need us to know and be stable and confident, and just do what's next. We're making meals, we're fixing things up, and they can take comfort and courage in that. And once we learn to trust God, there is hope and there is a future. And I found in my walk with the Lord, I rarely get the whole picture. You kind of get, do this next. Do this next. And it's easy to try and figure it all out. Well, I want to know, where am I going? What are we going to do? But do this next. Make the meal. Clean up the yard. Do what's next. Sometimes when bad things happen, we start looking backwards and asking questions about how this happened. Whose fault is this? What can we do that? When we look to the next step, we're brought back to the current moment, and our thoughts are on doing what needs to be done right now. If we look forward, we can make plans, but there's the risk of the departing from the plan, the Lord's plan, to work on our own plans. One thought I have, and I've shared it before, I think it's a good thought, but in order for God to direct our steps, we must start taking steps. We're standing still, doesn't matter which way you face, you're still in the same place. So you got to start taking steps to be directed. I always think about that with I have a sailboat. With the boat, if you're sitting still, it doesn't matter which way you turn, it's just still sitting there. You got to be moving in order for the rudder to get the flow and to start directing it. Sometimes you have to start moving in a direction you don't want to go to get it going. But you've got to be moving to be directed. And I know, as some among us are dealing with bad news, it's hard to know, what do I say? What do I do? I want to be helpful, but I don't know what to do. And maybe sometimes we just need to take that first step. Give them a hug. Say, I'm sorry this happened, or how can I be helpful? Sometimes it's hard when you ask people stuff like that because they don't know what they need, and you put them in a position to have to tell you something to do, but sometimes you just have to do something, even if it's simple. And that way we can bring the Lord to them because He's in us. And once we start taking those steps, we can let the Spirit guide us and lead us on how things should be done. So that's my message for us this morning. I hope the Lord's spoken to you, encouraged, and built you up, and given you some next steps. Thank you. All right, here we have our message. We certainly thank you for joining us, and please invite you to share this with your family and friends. Our audio can be found on bayviewcc.org. Facebook Live is on Bayview Christian Center. The YouTube video at Bayview Christian Center. Join us on Wednesday at 7 p.m. We're doing, what are we at? Season 4, Episode 7 is the next one. We've been enjoying this series. It's kind of an interesting retelling of the gospel stories. And if you would like to give to Bayview Christian Center, you can text GIVE to 281-559-6580. And that's all our messages for today. We thank you so much for joining us.